Welcome to another Everything You Wanted to Know and Were Afraid to Ask in Real Estate. The question of the week is regarding commercial properties, or as a matter of fact residential properties, and there may be some environmental concerns. If I could expand a little bit on the issue, so let's talk a little bit about a residential property. Let's say someone is deciding to buy a property and there may be a underground oil tank from many years ago. How do we go about? So then, putting out an offer for such a property, you will have to make sure that there's a clause to protect the buyer that if there is an underground tank, that tank will be disposed of, and it was a matter of negotiation who's going to pay for the work, and actually it could be quite expensive. Let's say someone deciding to buy a property, a home, next to a gasoline station. Might not be a bad idea to actually ask for an environmental assessment of the property, because maybe the gasoline station had a leak in its tanks, and maybe gasoline actually has seeped into this next door property, and maybe the ground is contaminated. Not a bad idea to put a clause there. Let's say someone wants to buy a commercial property, let's say a store that was once a cleaner's. Again, it's a matter of putting in the offer a clause to make sure that environmental studies are done, whether it's a level 1 and 2, and depending how difficult or how intensive this whole issue is, to make sure that the chemicals that were used during the previous business of laundry and so on, that there is no seepage to the ground. Let's say somebody decides to buy a gasoline station itself and he wants to redevelop into something, into a condo, whatever. Again, very important to make sure that there is no seepage to the ground. Let's say someone decides to buy a property that belonged once to Hydro. Hydro had properties and still owns property in Toronto where they had transformers and things of this nature. Very good idea to make sure that even though studies were probably done, but just to ensure that everything is done properly and there is no environmental issues whatsoever. So this is something to be very cautious about. If you have any specific questions, you really want to speak to a person that is a professional that's in the field, and make sure that everything is done accordingly to protect yourself and to make sure there are no issues that will come up later on. If you have any other questions, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial, or investments, by all means you could send your questions to me via email. You could use any of the contacts in my website, or you could call me directly at my cell.